Now, let's look at the concept of web browser. The user accesses the website on a client computer by typing the address of the website in a web browser. That web browser is installed on the client computer. Now let's get this thing clear. The person that is accessing or that is looking for a website, we call him client. The computer is also called client computer. Now, before you can begin to search for a website, you need a software called web browser. A good example is Mozilla Firefox, or Internet Explorer, or Opera. And even on mobile phone, we have Opera Mini, and we have a mobile browser for accessing websites. So a web browser is a software that connects the user to the web page he's looking for online. The web address of the website is called URL. So all the client needs to do is to type the URL or the web address in the browser. And a very good example of a URL, which is called Uniform Resource Locator, is www.yahoo.com. Once you type that address on the client computer that is connected to the internet will search for the web server that has the URL that is connected to the content that the client is looking for. So that is the concept of web browser and URL. That URL, we call it the web address that is connected to your content, and your URL will be your domain name. You're going to buy domain name when your site is ready. You buy hosting account where you upload the content. So the content of your site and the domain name, they are tied together through domain name server. And once you give the address to anybody through their computer, they can access your site once they have a browser installed on their computer. Now let's look at types of websites. We have static websites. I mentioned this earlier on. These are websites that display only information. There is very little or no interaction with the users, just for them to read something online and get information. And I want to tell you that 60% of most sites are static. The remaining 40%, they offer dynamic interaction. So that means we also have dynamic websites. A dynamic website will contain database, because in a dynamic website, maybe somebody is registering, somebody is making payment, somebody is uploading, somebody is downloading. All those processes, they work with database, because what the person is downloading is coming from the database. And if you are uploading your data, maybe you are registering on a site, your registration data or your details will also be stored in a database. So there is much interaction with the users on a dynamic website. The users can enter data, they can modify information, they can upload data, they can even download any resource from the site. I want to assure you that in this training, you are going to develop dynamic website, because you are going to learn HTML, CSS, you are going to learn PHP, you are going to learn MySQL. The combination of these four technologies will make a very dynamic website. So that will lead me to explaining the technologies or the tools that you needed to build a dynamic website. Now, a website is developed or built using one or more of the following softwares. Now, we have HTML as number one, hypertext markup language. Then number two, we have CSS, which is called cascading style sheet. We have JavaScript. We have PHP. PHP means hypertext preprocessor. It doesn't follow the acronym. Formerly it was called personal home page, but later the name was changed to hypertext preprocessor to reflect what PHP actually does. Now the number 5 technology is MySQL. SQL means structured query language. So the type we are going to learn in this training is MySQL. We have Microsoft SQL and some other type of SQL. Then you need another technology called web server. Now, let me stress here that a web server can be a computer and it can also be a software. In this case, I'm referring to web server as a software because PHP and MySQL, they can never run without a web server. Then the number 7 technology is a text editor where you write your code or your tags, or what we refer to as IDE, Integrated Development Environment. So you need a text editor or integrated development environment in order to write your HTML, in order to write CSS, JavaScript, PHP, MySQL. You will need this text editor. Now, you do not need to be scared at this point. To develop a website, you don't need anything except your laptop. And I want to assure you that most of these technologies, you will write them using what we call a text editor. And there is a text editor that came with every laptop or every desktop purchased, and it is called Notepad. So to develop a website, all you need is your laptop. You may not even buy a single software. Just look for Notepad on your computer and begin to write your HTML, CSS, and before you know it, you have developed a very dynamic website. Even PHP, JavaScript, we can write them using Notepad. Now, let's still talk about technologies and tools used for building a dynamic website one by one. Now, I will talk about HTML. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It is not a total programming language but a set of tags or codes which are used to design web pages. It gives the structure of the website. Now, the Hypertext Markup Language, referred to as HTML, is the backbone of every website. If you want to develop a site, you must learn it. Either you are using PHP or ASP.NET, or any language you are using to code your site, you have to learn Hypertext Markup Language because the structure of your site, the way you lay it out, either in 3 columns, 2 columns, or whatever layout you are going to use, they all depend on HTML. You will use HTML to lay out, to structure your site. Now, the HTML tags, there is what we call tags. Some people argue that HTML is a programming language, but I disagree with that. It's not a total programming language. It's a set of tags or code that you write in a text editor like Notepad or Adobe Dreamweaver, which is an example of IDE, and you run it in the browser. By the time we begin learning HTML basics, you are going to see how simple it is. Now, let's look at CSS. CSS means cascading style sheet. Now, it is used to style HTML elements. Now, the structure of the site is given by HTML, but the styling of the site, that is, giving it dimension, how wide is your website, the color typography, the border, the spacing, the size or the font size, and every other thing, the animation you are going to add, the background color, and so on and so forth. They are done using CSS. So you can see that learning HTML and CSS alone can give you a complete website. The only thing that will not happen is dynamism. Your site will not be dynamic with only HTML and CSS. But I want to tell you that the two technologies are very, very important. When you want to add dynamism, then you begin to learn PHP and MySQL. Now the PHP will handle the programming code, while MySQL will handle the database. But we are going to spend much time with HTML and CSS because you need to have a grip of the two technologies in order to develop a very good website. So we use CSS for layout of our website also, and for the styling. Don't forget that HTML is for structure, the structure of the site, the content of the site. HTML, we had that, but the layout and the styling is for the CSS. Now, another technology you will likely need is JavaScript. We use JavaScript for validation of web pages. Have you ever noticed when you are filling a form or you are logged into Facebook or your Gmail and you do not enter a correct username or password, you are going to receive a red message that says invalid password or username not correct. Those messages, we call it validation messages. So we use JavaScript to do that. JavaScript is not the same as Java programming language. Remember, we have a Java programming language for writing mobile application, or even for writing a very robust application. JavaScript is a scripting language. It's not a programming language, but we use it in website development. We use JavaScript to dynamically manipulate CSS element and validate web form. The major function of JavaScript is validation. For example, you are checking email address and you have a message that says enter correct password or enter username required. All these are done using JavaScript. Although you cannot rely upon JavaScript for security, because in your website somebody may inject code. Somebody may write what we call SQL injection. The most reliable way to validate your site against hackers or against entering wrong thing is by performing the validation on a server by using PHP. So that's why I'm not stressing the use of JavaScript here, but it's good you learn it, but it's not in the scope of this course. We are going to use PHP instead to validate our web page.